Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this special coverage of the Russia-Ukraine file. In today's file, we will be discussing the latest updates regarding the Russia-Ukraine, which entered the 68th day with explosions still being recorded in several Ukrainian cities. To discuss further, we will have to go to a break and then we come back. And before we delve into analysis, this is the latest updates on the situation according to a report from a Russian ministry official. Moscow believes that the risks of nuclear war should be kept to a minimum and that any armed conflict between nuclear powers should be prevented. Vladimir Yermakov, the foreign ministry's head of nuclear non-proliferation, said all nuclear powers must stick to the logic laid out in official documents aimed at preventing nuclear war. So let me start with you, General Vassin. President Vladimir Putin said he was moving his deterrent forces, meaning nuclear weapons. What do we get from this? Is he really going to opt for that? Hello, do we have General Vassin?
Yes, okay. Yeah, I just heard your question about the deterrence and the nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. I mean, 10 weeks into the war, mm-hmm. Now the likelihood of the strategic nuclear weapons is not feasible, mm-hmm. because of the localized war in the UK, though it has a great impact in the world. So the likelihood of the use of tactical weapons cannot be discarded.
Mm-hmm. Even if Moscow Russia is provoked further?
Yes, if Moscow is provoked further. Mm-hmm. And but the other factors is, since Ukraine lies right next to the Russian region, and it does not it does not look suitable because the impact is going to be borne by themselves also, though they hold about 2,000 tactical weapons. So, I mean, you can analyze that it may be, and it may be statements that come for political gains rather than the use of tactical nuclear weapons as well. So it has both sides of the coins, actually.
Very nice indeed. What about you, Mr. Denis Bechtold? What are your comments on the possibility of using nuclear weapons here if Moscow is further provoked?
Yes, you also here give the answer. Moscow is now really being provoked by the Western countries. And its invasion to Ukraine, it was an aggression, and Russia is now waging an aggressive war. On the other hand, it was also provoked by the Western countries. This is the other side of the truth. And in this situation, the Russian mentality has such an they have such a mistake. I think the Russians all the time say we can destroy the whole world if we want. We are so stronger, etc. They want to be proud of their power, but the Western states now doing everything in order not to leave any place for a negotiation to come into agreement with Russia. They are doing everything not to leave any space for negotiations with Russia. In this situation, if Russia is provoked ever further, as a last choice, they can apply to this. They can apply these nuclear weapons, I suppose. On the one hand, because that the West is now provoking. On the other hand, the Russian administration tries to prove itself for this reason also. For example, just a few months before the war, nobody could have suggested that such a war would have occurred. But the events took us to such a situation.
Very nice indeed. Let me get back to you, General Binoculars Besniat. President Vladimir Putin has reiterated several times that he will not stop his military operations until his objectives are met. Do we notice any difference, maybe a shift in the objectives of his military operation, or he is still sticking to the same?
That usually come out of leaders, particularly when they are when they go into wars. So the main thing is looking into the inside of rather than the statements that come out, though they do have some meanings. But looking at the nuclear side of this thing, let us look at 2 or 3 things. One is looking at the United States intelligence is looking into the storage, the likelihood of the nuclear warheads coming out of the storage and being used. And the other thing is, Russia is very well dependent on what China will do when it decides to go for nuclear weapons, as the meeting of President Xi Jinping and President Putin. They have a strategic partnership and they have no limits to start with during the February meet. So it depends on, and China has a policy of no nuclear device first. So the Russian getting backed up from China, and at the same time the United States intelligence looking very carefully into the likelihood of the warheads coming out of the storage. Has a less, and if you look at 3 categories, most likely, likely, and least likely. So I would say it is least likely that Russia will really go into a nuclear shootout, whether it's tactical or strategic, is no point.
Very nice. Moving on now, dozens of civilians were evacuated on Sunday from the city of Mariupol in the southeast of Ukraine, where they were trapped in the steel complex of Azovstal with the Ukrainian soldiers who are still resistant under the Russian bombs. The Russian Defense Ministry releases a video showing civilians being evacuated from an area near the Azovstal plant in Mariupol without stating the date of the operation.
Today we finally managed to start the evacuation of people from Azovstal. After many weeks of negotiations, after many attempts, different meetings, calls, countries, proposals, finally, not a single day has passed without trying to find a solution to save our people. More than 100 civilians have already been evacuated, women and children above all, who had fled the hostilities there in Azovstal. Given the complexity of the process, the first evacuees will arrive in Zaporozhye tomorrow morning. Let's hope it doesn't fail. Our team will find them there. I hope that tomorrow all the necessary conditions will be met to continue the evacuation of people from Mariupol. We plan to start at 8 a.m.
Back to you, Mr. Denis Bechtold. Since you're in Kiev, what can you tell us about this operation and what's the latest from Ukraine?
Now the main epicenter of the war is the Donbas region. Unlike the first stage of the war, during the first phase of the war, the main epicenter of the war was the outskirts of the capital, Kiev, and the provinces of Kiev, Chernihiv, Sumy, and Kharkiv. But now, since the Russian army couldn't capture Kiev within a short time, they retreated back. And now they mainly focused on the Donbas region. Mariupol is also one of the main cities of the Donbas region, and they have almost completely captured the city of Mariupol, except for this steel plant called Azovstal, but it's also, if we talk about the city of Mariupol, they have captured almost all of Mariupol. And but the Russian army was expecting a breakthrough in Donbas region. They are strengthening their forces, but up to now they haven't managed to make any breakthrough in Donbas region either, because the Ukrainian army has also concentrated in the east. For this, this is also one of the reasons. And secondly, the Western states have been rendering arms support to Kiev. This also has changed the situation. Although Russians were expecting a kind of victory until the Victory Day, which is on the 9th of May, now it is very adopted that they will manage to gain a victory until 9th of May. So this situation has come to a kind of dead end. But there is a more dangerous situation. The war may be spread to other regions, such as Moldova. For example, the Transdniester region. There were some missile attacks. It was unclear who has thrown those missiles, but the breakaway region of Moldova, where there is a Russian population, they claim that they were thrown by the Ukrainian authorities, but the Ukrainian authorities say that this is just a provocation of Russia in order to spread the war. In a way, there is such a danger that the war may be spread to Moldova. And another issue, now the Western states also, especially Britain, they have been raising their expectations. They say that the war will not finish until Ukraine captures, until Ukraine liberates the Crimean Peninsula. So if the events continue like this, then the war may continue even further.
Very nice indeed. Let me get back to you, General Binaj Basniat. Since you are a military expert, I would like to raise this question with you. Every year on the 9th of May, Russia celebrates its World War II Victory Day over Germany. But now the date is triggering deep anxiety for many Ukrainians who fear Russia may try and mark the day with a major attack. How likely is this attack, and can we expect a sudden attack from Russia?
Yeah, the likely, I mean, when you look at the war right from the beginning, I mean, it was supposed to be a short, limited war with the capture of Kiev, but now it has shifted to the eastern part of the region, in the Ukraine region. So I think the strategic thinking has shifted now, but not the political objectives. So the political objectives is slowly, I mean, getting flexible now. And I think Russia would look at the region into dividing the region in several other, I mean, before the aggression started, I mean, two of the Donetsk and Luhansk was liberated as, I mean, they were declared as a independent state, So I think Russia would like to see that further and get Ukraine as a landlocked country. So I think that is the immediate aim of Russian once the initial strategic outlook shifted.
Moving on now, German Federal Minister of Finance Christian Lindner said on Saturday that Germany doesn't agree to pay for Russian gas in rubles and has no such plans in the future as it seeks energy independence. Lindner tweeted that they are doing everything they can to become independent from Russian energy as quickly as possible. Back to you, General Binaj Basni. How effective is the energy card that Russia is playing now? Without the revenues that Russia gets from energy, how is it going to be able to finance its war further? Do you think there are less costly alternatives, that is?
I mean, the war actually has four flanks. One is the reshaping of the international and global landscape from like United States dominance. And the second is Russia's standing as a further European power, like politically and economically. So when it and the third is like a diplomatic path during the war now and the post-war. So and the fourth would be an alternative to dependency on energy and food as well as the global supply chain. So things have already started changing now. Though like the strategic surroundings before the war was the expansion of NATO and the rising of the United States inspirations in the sphere of Russian influence and European nations' inclinations toward Russia for energy, and so this is like if you can argue that this is an extension of the Cold War. But your particular question now is on how will things move forward? Now things are changing. Sweden and Finland are neutral states is thinking of joining the NATO now, and the dependency of energy and with the sanctions, though doesn't seem that effective. I'm sure the European nations looking into the future will look for alternatives. And regarding the international norms of how things run on financial aspect, China and Russia has always been in the forefront of getting an alternative to the dollars, and so gold could have been an alternative. But you can look at examples of other like Libya, for example, when they started bringing out the issues about gold being the next international domain, and things changed there. You see, so but I'm sure the Russian aggression now will change the strategic environment on the dependency of energy, crude oil, and the supply chains and the economic benefits that the Russians were getting.
Very nice indeed. Mr. Denis Bechtold, how can Europe survive without the availability of the Russian gas, according to you?
Well, as another kind of weapon, another means of threatening, Russia may apply to this choice as well. However, I think that this choice or this threatening tool is not so effective as it would have been 10 years ago, for example. Because first of all, as my colleague also has noticed, this is also a matter of revenue for the Russian economy. Secondly, for example, many European countries have reduced the use of Russian gas in the last 10 years. For example, 10 years ago, or even 7 or 8 years ago, Russia could have threatened Ukraine by cutting gas. But now Ukraine has many alternative resources, as well as the other European states have alternative resources. So cutting Russian gas to Ukraine, it might be a blow to many European countries, but not such a great blow as it would have been 10 years ago.
Very nice indeed. And let me share with you this info quickly. European Union energy ministers hold emergency talks on Monday as the bloc strives for a united response to Moscow's demand that European buyers pay for Russian gas in rubles or lose their supply. Russia halted gas supplies to Bulgaria and Poland last week after they refused to meet its demand to effectively pay in rubles. I get back to you, General Binod Basni. How do you foresee the energy crisis for Europe after this?
Well, regarding the energy, not just energy, is food as well. It's because the global wheat and barley, almost a third of the global thing is supplied from the region. And regarding, this has both sides. When the countries are facing crisis now, I think there is an opportunity as well. So the opportunity is looking for alternatives of how to fulfill the demands that. And what I see now is, when the energy crisis and the sanctions are on its track, I think this will be taken. This has to be taken up step by step, rather than, I mean, stopping everything, because energy is needed for, I mean, so for all the utilizations of resources, and it's so much dependent for the economy as well. So while the conflict, the conflict is going to, prolong, so is an alternative being going to be, sought for the energy sector also.
Very nice indeed. Now, Berktay, what can you tell us? What can stop Russia? I mean, apparently, as Pelosi said, technically we're not going to take Russia, treat us pretty much like a bully, and they are not going to let Russia bully them. How can you interpret this? I mean, is the world capable of doing more to support Ukraine?
Well, this is a complicated issue because Turkey also tries everything to stop the war between Russia and Ukraine, because the war directly threatens us, the Turks. But on the one hand, yes, Russia didn't want to perceive Ukraine as an independent state. It was one of the reasons of this current Russian-Ukrainian war. But another point was that the Western countries tried to encircle Russia. They tried to dominate in Eastern Europe, especially Britain. So they also want to struggle against Russia, and Ukraine has turned into a kind of place of war between Russia and the West. So the Western world is not a kind of a place of arbitration in this issue. It's also a part of this conflict, just like Russia. So the solution could be found on some common grounds. And Russia, first of all, the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine should be recognized by everybody, including Russia, of course. And but on the other hand, some options also should be found for Russia in order for it to save its face. Otherwise, by harming its prestige all the time, no result can be taken. It might trigger only a further, even a greater war, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that Russia is able to survive these sanctions imposed by the West? I mean, especially with third countries. Do you think that perhaps it could form an alliance with China and other, traditional, let's say, allies of Russia?
Well, the situation, the sanctions, of course, they cause damage to Russian economy and to many spheres in Russia. However, the Russian administration has managed to show this conflict to its public, to its own public, to its own people, not as a conflict, not as a simple conflict between Russia and Ukraine, but against the whole Western world. The Putin administration says, yes, you see, our people, you see, we are waging a war against the whole Western world, against the European colonialism, against the European imperialism, against fascism, just like we waged a war during the Second World War, during the Great Patriotic War, as they call it. For this reason, the Russians perceive this as a war against a great enemy, according to their imagination. So, cannot cause a great damage to Putin's rule in Russia, but of course it causes great damage to Ukrainian economy. On the other hand, when we look at China, when we look at the People's Republic of China, they try to remain neutral on some issues. For example, it might be surprising, but for example, the Ukrainian administration is a pure pro-Western administration. However, the biggest trade partner of Ukraine at the moment is the People's Republic of China, the biggest communist country in the world. So China try to present itself as a neutral state, so it has strengthened its position. So a war is, of course, completely undesirable for China as well. And if Russia tries to continue its aggression, of course, this might cause a kind of harm in its relation with China. However, for China, the biggest enemy is the United States. This is also another factor. So in this situation, China may prefer to support Russia. There are lots of factors in those world politics, I think.
Very nice. And in the related news, Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, declares Moscow's upcoming Victory Day celebrations on May 9th will have no impact on the pace of its special military operations in Ukraine. Speaking with the Italian outlet Mediaset, Lavrov insisted on Sunday that Moscow would not rush to wrap up its operation in time for the anniversary, which celebrates Nazi Germany's surrender to Allied forces, including the Soviet Union, in 1945. Back to you, General Binod Vassin. How long do you think this war is going to drag on, as Russia's military objectives are clear? I mean, they are not going to stop until they are accomplished.
I mean, the war is going to prolong as long as I see, but this war did not come as a surprise. I mean, for Russian aggression, the 2008 Russo-Georgian War was there, and the intent was very similar to what it is today. And the 2014 Crimea Peninsula annexation was there. And the declaration of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent states was there before launching of the war. And the month of April has also been a very robust diplomatic movement, either from Prime Minister Boris Johnson's or from the Secretary of State Blinken. So this has actually fourfold. One is these geostrategic interests of the United States and the European nations. And the second they would like to see is a weakened Russian military capabilities. Third is the sovereignty and united Ukraine. And finally, a comprehensive peace deal. So it comes to the questions of my last point, the comprehensive peace deal. Now, the environment of how that is going to come. Mm-hmm. So I think the Russians, until and unless they secure the eastern sector under their control and the access to the sea, I think they will still be reluctant in coming into a position on the peace talks, because ultimately a peace deal has to occur for the settlement of the war. So it's, I think, both the Westerns and the Ukrainians together and the Russians trying to find a conducive environment for their stand on the table. So that, Russia would always like to see a weak Ukraine, so that the sphere of influence that they have in the region, does not last, and the Western's influence in the region would de-escalate.
Very nice indeed. Thank you for these thorough analysis. Thank you for both guests for your thorough analysis and vivid discussion. Thank you, dear viewers, for keeping it here on All 24 News. And by the occasion of Eid, happy and blessed Eid for the Muslim community around the world, and especially in the war-torn areas in Ukraine and Palestine. By the occasion of Eid al-Fitr, a feast again, and bye for now.